When it comes to luxury watches and value retention, it seems like rarity, scarcity, and overall desirability have a lot to do with how solid of an investment your purchase is. But there are some other somewhat obvious factors you might be overlooking, so let's explore that further. It is 12:50 p.m. Let's get down to business. Now real quick guys, we have this gorgeous Longines tank circa 1969 over at the Time Teller shop. It is absolutely a beautifully sized, immaculate gentleman's watch. You should check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. And yeah, thanks for supporting the shop. The first thing we got to look at is the condition of a watch. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that a watch that is in more pristine of a condition is probably going to fetch a higher price than a watch that is totally thrashed. Now, there are some outliers when it comes to patination. Now, there are watches called tropical dial watches that have more patination on the dial, and those tend to actually fetch higher prices at auction than watches that have zero patination. Now, this is somewhat subjective, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but I would consider those tropical dial watches outliers. The next factor would be original box and papers. Now, when a watch comes with its original packaging and paperwork, that's considered more of a complete package and will fetch a higher price and retain more value. The next factor would be original parts. So if your wristwatch has all original parts, nothing has been modified or replaced, it's probably going to fetch a higher price and again, retain more value because it hasn't been tampered with, or another word that you sometimes see in watch listings, molested. I don't know if I can say that on YouTube. Real quick guys, something that I want to bring up when we're talking about original parts would also be an extensive and detailed service history. You have to think of a watch's service history as like a clean bill of health. So the watch has been maintained, it's been serviced, it's been inspected regularly by authorized people, so people that are actually trained and competent, and of course with that, the watch will fetch higher prices and probably retain more value. The next thing I'd consider would be materials used. So just on a base level, obviously precious metals and gemstones are going to be more sought after and desirable than, your basic common material like stainless steel. Now, there are exceptions to this. I've seen many a stainless steel Rolex fetch much higher prices than, say, a precious metal Grand Seiko or even a precious metal Hublot. Which brings us to the next and final factor that I'd consider, which is the watch itself. That's right, the reference number, the year it came out. Certain watches are just the top dogs that everyone wants, like a Rolex 1016. That's more desirable than a precious metal Hublot no one's ever heard of. And that's because this random little stainless steel field watch from Rolex happens to be incredibly desirable. Or a stainless steel milsub. The materials used are not super duper desirable, sought after, rare, scarce, but the reference number, when it came out, the watch itself is so dang desirable that there are other watches that are made from much more desirable materials that simply do not hold a candle to a milsub when it comes to value retention and desirability and, yes, price and value. So how big of a player is scarcity when it comes to a watch's value retention? Well, for that, let's take a look at how many watches various brands produce in a year. Cartier produces about 500,000 new watches a year. Omega similarly produces about 500,000 new watches. Hublot produces about 60,000 new watches a year. Patek Philippe produces about 50,000 new watches a year. And Vacheron Constantin produces about 20,000 new watches a year. Now, to give you a frame of reference for these production numbers, brands like Seiko produce multiple millions of watches a year. So when we look at the numbers listed, sure, a Vacheron is almost positively going to retain value and even increase in value at a higher rate than, a Seiko. And the numbers kind of reinforce that, right? Vacheron produces only 20,000 new watches a year versus Seiko's multiple millions of new units per year. But there seems to be an outlier when it comes to these production numbers. Rolex. Rolex produces a relatively large amount of new watches each year, coming in just over 1 million. And still, Rolex seems to have the best value retention, and even in a downward market performs better than any of the other brands I've mentioned today. So why is that? Brand equity, brand recognition, regardless of the fact that Vacheron produces more complicated, more rare, objectively more impressive watches than Rolex. More people simply want a Rolex on their wrist because of what they feel the name means to them. Success, prestige, hard work. And whether or not I agree with this, the fact is you won't have to explain to a person what Rolex means the same way you'll have to explain to someone what a Vacheron Constantin means. A Vacheron Constantin. First of all, if you say that, they'll be like, well, bless you. Did you sneeze? Did you have a stroke? So jokes aside, it seems Rolex truly has the crown in more ways than one. So would I recommend you invest in wristwatches? No, because I don't find that to be the true reward of this hobby. But if you are going to invest in this crazy world of horology, I hope this episode gave you some things to consider and maybe even helped you out a bit. Alright guys, I will catch you on the next one. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed. I'm Jory Goodman, the Time Teller, and always remember I didn't invent time. I just tell it.